And that's why you pull the thermometer out last.
Well, see, we use one of them thermopans. So you just, pop it in the surface and it tells the temperature.
You know
But
what
that's
I
only for cooking. That's not for people. You can't be doing that with the
not for
thermopans.
fun.
No,
Not not
not
for
even for fun. No,
not for jollies.
no,
Not
no,
for a bored day on a
no.
Wednesday afternoon.
No, you get one of them infrared jobbies from Harbor Freight, and you can stand across the room, and yeah, you're normal. Well, your temperature's normal.
You know what I hate?
But
Lots of things.
yeah, same here.
One such thing in the realm of commercials. I hate I liked there were some stupid commercials back in the day, and I'm gonna tell you one from back in the day, but there's one that I hate now. And maybe you have one that you hate and just but I'm gonna tell you a modern one,
Mhm.
and it's more difficult with the modern ones because there's less focus. Like it's more blurred, but there's one that stands out. And I'm gonna tell you an old one. So I really dislike in the modern world. Well, I'm gonna tell you the old one first and then the modern one. Because I really hate the modern one. McDonald's at some point back in the day,
Uh-huh.
they always had certain type of commercials, which was fine. But one day, sometime in the mid to late 80s, and I remember it because I hate it so much. It's not nice to say you hate things. I was always taught growing up.
Yeah,
You don't say you hate things and this and that. That was one of like the
yeah,
things that decent people explained to their children back in the day. At least in my world, I'm sure you had that same roughly experience. You
yeah.
don't say you hate things. But now that I'm an older person, I'm going to go ahead and say what I hate. I hated that McDonald's thing where it had the Mc night to night something. And what it was this guy dressed in a suit, like,
Yeah.
and his head was the shape of a moon,
Crescent moon, yes.
crescent moon. I hated that commercial.
I remember it.
And when I saw that commercial, Mark, I looked at it and said, "This doesn't work for me." And I don't know what kind of thing, but in my mind, it didn't match.
You remember the Burger King?
Yes, that was horrible.
That was the one for me that I didn't like.
Yeah, that was pretty horrible.
That was the one for me that I didn't like. I remember the crescent, but I was so out of McDonald's by that time it didn't even matter to me. I'm like, man, you guys are really scraping the bottom of the barrel, aren't you? And then the Burger King thing came up with that plastic face, creepy looking Burger King, and it's like, who decided this was a good idea?
It was horrific.
Yeah,
It was horrific. I remember that. But the shocking Moon McMoon tonight or Moon whatever, there was something just not right about it. I just didn't
yeah,
like it. I'm
yeah.
sure the
I'm with you.
commercials. Yeah, I'm sure other people have seen it. But as far as the modern one, there's a new McDonald's commercial that people say, and it's like a little hum,
Mhm.
and now I forget, but every time I hear it, it reminds me how much I hate it.
Do 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 do.
Oh, that's it. So it'll pop up, and then they'll say, and introducing two burgers for $500 or whatever the stupid rate is, at your McDonald's, and then a guy will sit down and he'll look at the camera and say, do 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 do. I find it so insulting. It's it's like teasing you with something you don't want to eat anyhow. It's like look, I've got this hot freaking steaming bundle of crap. Do, 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 do. And it's like,
Grease burger. Yeah, I know.
yeah, so I don't like
Well,
it.
you remember back when McDonald's was geared towards kids? That's what it was for. It was for kids and old people. Most folks didn't care if they went to McDonald's or not. Kids loved McDonald's because they put a lot of ketchup on the hamburgers, and kids like ketchup. And that's all there is to it. I mean, we didn't care if there was lettuce, tomato, pickle, nothing. We didn't care. As long as there's ketchup on it, we ate it. And then older people, because they were cheap. And you could go out, a couple of times a month and eat at McDonald's. And one of their advertising slogans was you could get a hamburger Well, it wasn't a slogan. It was one of their big main ads was you can get a hamburger, fries, and a drink and change back from your dollar. And so, yeah, so you had older people on a fixed income and you had kids, and that's who they geared it towards. Now, I knew it was over when McDonald's started serving salads
Oh, but that was
because,
in my era. They started serving salads. It wasn't
but
over.
who goes to McDonald's to stay in shape? It's not what you go to McDonald's for. You go
No,
to
but
McDonald's to eat a greasy hamburger, greasy fries, and have a milkshake. That's what McDonald's is for. You don't go there to get in shape. Come on.
but you know their reasoning, right?
Yeah, well, yeah, I do know that. Well, we've got to have healthy options. No, you don't. You're a
No,
burger joint.
not only that, it is a healthy option or healthier option until you pour like a gallon of French dressing on it and
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah.
Can I have 10 packets of French dressing? Get them to me now. You know, and
The ranch dressing's so thick, you got to use a spatula to get it out of the little plastic thing because it won't pour.
no, like let's say like moms and like they come along and maybe they don't want that greasy darn burger, but they'll have a salad. It's also a second. So it was a good idea, and those salads were. I remember them. They had a cobbler as well. I used to work at McDonald's back
Yeah,
in the day, so I
yeah.
remember those things. But your point is taken. So they keep adding to the thing. Um, yeah. Okay. So your
And
point is
then
taken.
and then wraps. It's like, come on, this is a burger joint. This is a burger joint. You know? I don't know. They caved too easily is I guess my thing, you know. Well, you don't have healthy options and I didn't have any choice, so I had to get 32 Big Macs.
Hmm.
You know, a bowl. You're supposed to be an adult. You know, if you order 32 Big Macs, they're going to sell you 32 Big Macs. That's their job, is to sell hamburgers.
My
But
friend.
you can't blame them because your gross tonnage is increased. I mean, you know. And I say this as a short, fat son of a gun, so I can talk trash.
Yeah, we're kind of like, I hate to say because I don't want to, but some things are just the insulting side of it. So you don't want to really go because it quarters so many people. But according to what people say, and I'm sure that that there's some
Mhm.
fat asses in other places, but that the United States, like some people are shocked at the enormity of the general American whatnot public when they're traveling from abroad over and plus our huge drinking cups. Like for me, if I see a huge cup like that,
Mhm.
it's perfectly normal, and I'm thinking to myself, yeah, I'm gonna like in
Mhm.
general, not lately, but like in general across my life. I look at it and I'm saying, yeah, I'm gonna have to go for seconds with that one, you know, and it's like this big and stuff. But for like people from Europe and other places, you know, a small little thing is sufficient, and this and that. It's so you know, I guess quaint and controlled, but we explode into
Uh-huh.
hot sauces and
Yeah.
and then and then we roll out of the store and digest as we're traveling. It's just you know, but
That's the American way. Pizza wasn't enough. We had to stuff the crust with sauce and cheese. Pizza wasn't enough. I
that's
mean,
true.
we take it and we bump it up to 11. You know,
Hmm.
that's what you can say about American fast food. These go to 11,
Yeah,
you know, and then we export it. Yeah.
I was surprised. I was not to talk when somebody's not here. I'm going to do it anyways because it's not negative.
Mhm.
I was talking to a certain. Actually, I'll cover the person's identity.
Mhm.
The person's an English guy
Okay.
that works in the woodworking community and turns items and
Yeah, we have no idea who you mean.
has been known to do scroll saw work. But I'm not going to reveal anything further. It just so happened we were hanging out one evening recently, just him and I,
Mhm.
and we did one of those tours where you use Google Earth
Mhm.
and allow the other person to take you on a journey through their hometown or whatever the case might be.
Uh-huh.
And oh, by the way, in order to conceal the person's identity even further, I'm gonna say that he's not in.
He's not
and,
here right now.
and he's not here in the chat whatsoever.
Hmm. Okay.
So we were talking, and so the person dropped the little cursor thing
Hmm.
onto their area, and I was enjoying a travel along through, I guess you'd call it the south, to be vague, the southeastern side of the British Isles. A hop, skip, and a jump, close to Dover. You could throw a pebble from there,
Hmm.
um, across the way from France, and he took me through this little journey through all these places, and I could see it, all the quaint and interesting to me from my vantage point, not exposed to that. Just there's something cool about that travel and stuff, and but then I asked him a question, and I was seeing the houses and whatnot, and this and that. So, and through the street, like
Hmm.
man view, person view,
Yeah.
first person. But then I started getting curious, and I started asking him questions like, "Oh, well, where's your nearest, like, I guess, grab all store, general whatnot, convenience and haberdashery type place?" And so I was taken there, and it's quite, like for our vantage point of
Uh-huh.
generalized like American big city, it's quite quaint and comforting and
Right.
just comfy.
Hmm.
And I said, well, how about where's your like major whatnot? Like where you have like other, like what if you need to re-up on a lot of freaking things? Because a cracker box and some potato chips at your local small convenience isn't going to feed the family.
Right.
So where do you go? And so then we went off,
Hmm.
and sure enough, supermarkets, not that
Uh-huh.
I didn't expect them not to have,
Right.
obviously, but to see it and the person be telling you, it's a different experience. Well, but then he took me further into what I described at the time, I'm paraphrasing, as your average American intersection, all in one stopping destination, with all the stores and all the trimmings and just and the big signs and stuff. It was, you could drop someone in the middle of that place somewhere in England over there, and you'd be in the middle of America, wherever. It was all the major stores, many
Hmm.
of them just simply British of their area. But the reason I'm telling you the story is that, sure enough, Pizza Hut,
Yep.
freaking Kentucky Fried Chicken. I was like,
Yep.
holy smokes!
Yep.
Yeah.
When my parents came over to Germany to visit us, we went to Paris. And the first night there, we couldn't find a restaurant that was open. We ended up eating at Burger King in Paris, you know? And it's like, who goes to Paris to eat at a Burger King? Well, we did. So it was one of those weird things. American pop culture and Americanisms and American food goes all over the place.
Hmm.
So, I mean, you'll find it in some of the weirdest locations. Now, I was kind of surprised that the UK was as welcoming to some of those American brands or stores or anything as it appears they have been. I mean, I watch a lot of British television, and as far as I know, everybody loves KFC over there, as far as I know. Um, I've never heard anybody say anything bad about them. Put it to you that way.
No, I think
Uh, McDonald's, they get they say this, they talk the same trash about McDonald's that we do. You know,
yeah.
and I don't know what other. Those are the only two that I can think of off the top of my head. I've heard a few things about Starbucks, but I don't know, is that just in London or what? So
London. So I'll say something about London. Well, go ahead. You're gonna show something.
I was just going to say that Jamie Page, howdy, Jamie, said we have a Tim Hortons. See, we don't even have a Tim Hortons. You Canadians have got to end this American discrimination. You know, come on now.
So I was gonna say that London.
Mhm.
I don't know what I was searching for, but I wanted to see how extreme the thing can go. Like what um like trying to find things that don't necessarily you would not expect in a. So I was looking
Yeah.
for Cuban restaurant. I guess it was something to do with us talking about the little window one
Mhm.
time. I said, well, where else out of the way that I would not expect? And so I went to London for, and there's a truckload of, I mean, not hundreds, but there's scattered. Remember, London also is a huge. I mean, if you look at it on the map, it's sprawling.
Yeah,
The,
it's big. It's a huge area.
the grid, when you look from above, you see London, but as you start to expand into it, you see all the little grid-like things starting to pop up, and you start to see how intricate it is, and how many people would occupy that space on a day to day. And they need to be fed, and they need to
Right.
be, all the services needed in a place so big. So it's just a major, massive freaking place. And sure enough, there's Cuban places, restaurants where you can walk up to the window and order Cuban coffee like you were in Miami or something. It is unbelievable. Now I wonder if Jamie Page has ever even ran into that, but London is so darn big. So yeah,
Yeah.
major cities, you'd expect there to be some bleed over, and you want your different types of food options
Well,
too.
yeah. I mean, it. But you see that in a lot of big cities here.
Hmm.
Um, it, I used to say that about San Francisco, in that you could eat in a different restaurant every week for a year and never have the same type of food, let alone, eat in the same place, because there were so many different, I mean, Greek restaurants and real Italian restaurants, not the Americanized version of them. You want Chinese? Okay. Do you want Szechuan? Do you want Cantonese? Do you want Mandarin? I mean, it was all over the place. And we're talking about restaurants that specialize in this type of food. You want Yugoslavian food? Well, then it was Yugoslavian. Now you'd be looking at more like Croatian or Montenegro, that type. A Spanish place, a French place. Then we get into Thai, and then we get into Cambodian and things like that. I mean, East Indian, you can just go crazy with the different types of food. You can't say Mexican food because there were like 6 different types of food depending upon the region it's from. Because Southern Mexican is completely different from Northern Mexican, which is completely different from the Yucatan Peninsula, which is completely different from the West Coast. Now West Coast is a lot of seafood, not a whole heck of a lot in the northern areas. I mean, it just, the variety was there, and just about every major city I visited has been very similar. Maybe not that huge of a variety, but a large variety of places that you wouldn't expect it to be. You wouldn't expect to find Vietnamese food in Nashville, but you will, you know.
Yeah,
So but that kind of thing to me is fascinating, and I love that kind of stuff because I'm kind of adventurous when it comes to food. So if it's something new that I've never tried, yeah, I want to try it. Let's just go check it out. Well, I want to see what I'm missing, you know.
it's interesting about the Italian when you mentioned it. You said real Italian as opposed to not
The Americanized version, yeah.
Americanized version. If you're meaning something like, let's say, what do they call Olive Garden and stuff like
Yeah,
that,
that's not authentic Italian, no.
but I ran into a video where some New York Italians
Hmm.
sat down. It's a great. I think I subscribed to their channel. I forget now because we watch so many things, but it was a sit down interview with a couple of Italians
Hmm.
in New York,
Yeah.
and they were talking about their food.
Hmm.
And when Italians from Italy come over,
Hmm.
they're like, "This is not Italian,"
Yeah.
and they're like, "Yes, it is, the American Italian."
Hmm.
And there's some parallels.
Yeah.
It's not quite perfect, but like let's say in the Cuban experience, when the Cubans left in '62 from '59 on,
Hmm.
um, they reestablished here what they had over there. They got
Right.
to work with, and so the recipes and the this and all that stuff.
Mhm.
But over there, due to the climate politically,
Mhm.
their options of what they offered receded into
Mhm.
very basic, according to their political system. So, come today, unless you're going to a fancy one that only certain people can get into, like if you're a tourist over there,
Mhm.
come today, you'll get the most authentic Cuban meal in
Mhm.
Miami. Others argue no, Tampa, because there's a variation.
Yeah.
Tampa, they came over since the mid 1600s and before, but a big deal happened in the 1600s, 1800s, mid 18 1600s, mid 1800s, because they started doing the tobacco thing. So they brought over recipes and things that were happening during the 1800s, that even though they pushed through to the things we have in Miami today, there were variations. So they may have different
Right.
combinations than we would have here, because things evolve. Well, the Italians were talking about when these Italians from Italy come over, and these American Italians, let's say, um, they arrived, and the lady explained, a very beautiful young lady. She says, well, she cooks and she's a critic and whatnot, a food critic, I'm saying.
Mhm.
And she's like, well, they come over and stuff, but I mean, this is completely Italian. And she explains, she explains something similar to what I just explained, but different. She says, when the Italians come here originally, they wanted to eat, and so they cooked, but they had to cook with the items available to them
Here.
where they were. and
Yes.
and you don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, so they had to adapt. So in a sense, this is an American version of
Right.
variation, but it's completely Italian, just
Right.
in the vein of what America is.
Right.
So there's a parallel somewhere
Yeah.
watery in there, yeah.
I was going to say exactly that same thing because they got over here and the ingredients weren't the same. There weren't a lot of olive groves over here, so olive oil was a premium price. Well, they didn't have that money to buy the olive oil. They had to make do with what they could get here. And that's just one example. And then you have regional differences over there because the food you'll get in Sicily is different from the food you're going to get in Naples, which is different from Emilia Romagna or
Yeah.
up in Tuscany. It's all these different regional things. When you say Italian food, you got to be more specific than that. It's kind of like when they say, well, American food is this. What American food?
the
Which
same
American food?
the same thing happens. Well, number one, Italy, that, yes, it's a thing right
Hmm.
now. Obviously, it's a country, but that wasn't a country. That wasn't like they weren't
They
all.
were city states. Yeah.
Yeah, they were all their own thing independently. There's
Hmm.
bleed over, but like the rest of Europe, they were their
Sure.
own pockets of things. Italy, the peninsula, established later on and unified, but prior to that,
Hmm.
you were about your local area. And so there was certain things. That's why, somewhere like, likewise, even in London, maybe for other, or England, or the UK in general, you'll have pockets of people with quite signature um, cultural things
Sure.
and language styles that may vary. It's still the same, like, let's say English, but they'll have, because there's that.
Sure.
And America, like you said, it is rounded off to
Hmm.
include a big, but it's more complex than just
Yes,
umbrella America.
absolutely. If you take a ham, some potatoes, and some fresh vegetables, and you hand that to somebody from Michigan and you hand it to somebody from Texas, you're going to get two completely different styles of cooking. They're both just as American can be, but they're completely different styles because they're used to cooking in different ways with different spices, with different methods, and what have you.
Yeah,
So, it's Jim Dockrell here. He says New England food is a lot different from Texas barbecue. I bet. Yeah, it is.
yeah.
Unless you have a Texas transplant up in Portland, Maine, then watch out because they're going to teach him a few things about lobster. But but yeah, your point is well taken, and it's absolutely right. When was the last time you had smoked salmon?
I mean, you can get that at your local store, but I don't buy it because it's expensive as hell. Um, it's been a while.
It's
I can't
almost
remember.
a staple up in this area because we get a lot of salmon. I mean, a lot of it. Because, I mean, Alaska's right up the road, you might say. And a lot of it gets shipped right straight down here. A lot of it is caught here along the Pacific coast.
Hmm.
And so it's fresh. I mean, the sucker was swimming a day before yesterday. So, but you're not going to get that in, Oklahoma or Arkansas or Kentucky
Right.
because it's just completely different. Well, yeah, and Linda just threw in a good one here too. Smoked salmon is entirely different in Britain. Yeah, it is because it's a different cooking technique, a different cooking method. So yours is different than ours because in the UK they tend to cold smoke their salmon, where we tend to hot smoke it. So it's cooked and smoked at the same time.
Well, JP, what we do here, as opposed to cold smoke or so, what we do is we get the steak, you know, and we just put it under because it's so hot. We just put it under our armpits and we wait for half an hour,
Mhm.
and they're nice and toasted on both sides.
Yeah,
No
just
need
seared.
seared. No
Yeah.
need. And by the way, are you ready for this? You'll never forget this one. No need for garlic. I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
Yeah.
I'm
Well,
sorry. I had to do it.
Jim Dockeral says I would go to Italy just for the food, but couldn't afford the transport aircraft to get my drunk ass back after gaining all the weight. Yeah, well, there is that. There is
Oh
that
shit.
because I'd be in the same boat with you. Jim, I don't know if you've ever had Greek food, but oh my gosh, is it fantastic? Oh my god.
So with the food thing and the variation stuff and thing, I want to say one of my pet peeves specifically with studying this thing and realizing so many things concerning this greater Spanish world
Mhm.
is the pockets of places where the Spanish settlers and immigrants and such would have settled and did settle and whatnot.
Mhm.
And Louisiana has its pocket with its cuisines
Mhm.
that has I don't know in detail, so I can't speak enough too much on it. But you would assume that it has its area Cajun influence into the thing, um, because that's where they've been for whatever X amount of like since the 1700s and whatnot. So they would have crept in and had their own thing to the point where you know it's its own local thing. But you can't
Right.
compare that to what Cubans would eat
No,
in South Florida,
no,
right? Yeah.
you really can't because the ingredients are completely different.
So over on I ran into a video and it's funny how this fits in. So there was an American lady that was recorded in like 1950 something. I want to
Mhm.
say 1954. And the channel's pretty cool. It's a channel where they preserve recordings from people, usually Americans, but they have other things where they talk about the old days. So like going back way back. And these are people that were still alive at the turn of the century
Mhm.
talking about the 1800s and this and that. And this lady was born in California, in
Mhm.
Los Angeles, in like 1878.
Mhm.
So she lived throughout the end of the 1780s, 1700, 1800s. Did I say 17? 1878 is what I wanted to say. I forget which one I said. She crossed over into the 1900s and lived up until like 1954 or something like that. So she had
Mhm.
a good chunk of a life if you consider that time frame.
Oh yeah.
Her granddaughter had the foresight. And dude, I'll try to find it and post it. She had the foresight to audio record her.
Yeah.
And she said, "Grandma, just tell me how you remember Los Angeles." And she said it Los Angeles in a Spanishy way. This is a American lady with an Anglo thing, but she said
Mhm.
it with the Spanish, um, quite different than what you would get now, obviously. But go ahead, Grandma. And she said, "Well, my grandmother," and she spoke very nicely. "My grandmother is being something to the effect of annoying, and she wants
Mhm.
me to say a few things, so I shall."
Mhm.
And what she laid out. She went from how food. So, for instance, talking about food, she said in those days, talking about like the 1800s and
Uh-huh.
turnover, everything was in barrels. She said,
Yeah.
if you wanted anything you wanted, came in, and she names the specific things. So they had these huge barrels. They had a word for that. You pluck them out. They'd have, and then they'd wrap whatever in a paper bag, in a
Hmm.
paper, like in just paper. They'd wrap it and then they'd hand it to you. And so, and she went over the streets, the people, dude. Un she unfolded a set of visuals using her words of the late 1800s in Los Angeles. That is fantastic. Anyways, part of the thing is, well, two things. One, she mentions, when she talks about Spanish people, she mentions them as Castilians.
Hmm.
The Castilians, quite different than the what we end up today with. You know,
Hmm.
in the general, I guess I'm gonna say flat out the short sighted roundabout, rounding the bases and creating one image for all people of Spanish heritage. Um, but the Castilians, she puts she's very specific in the way she says that. And she goes on. I was like, oh, well, look at this. This is quite an interesting thing. Quite the different world in today than the slivering creature that you see. The image that how things have unfolded. Just an incredible thing. So I took a note of that and said, well, look at that. But putting that to the side, on my personal exploration journey, she also explained how little or small or quaint LA was. And she
Hmm.
said, in those days, notice this is her talking in 1950 or 19, yeah, 50 something, talking about the 80s. In those days, there was no smog. It wasn't dirty and
Hmm.
stanky. And this is 1950 something.
Hmm.
And she's talking about LA as
Yeah.
if it could be 2023 or something like that. And she said it was quaint and people were dressed. And she explained to a T all the detail. It's just fantastic. I just wanted to put that
I,
out there.
I love that kind of thing. I really do, because, well, number one, she preserved the history. Number two, that
Yeah,
history was personal.
yeah.
Now, I don't know, this woman's granddaughter who had her record, was asking her questions and having her talk about her life in Los Angeles. I don't know, does she have kids or grandkids now? If this was being done in the 50s, she's probably got grandkids of her own.
That's a good question.
And here's hoping that somebody had the foresight, or she had the foresight, to start talking about her memories of the same thing. I love that kind of thing. Linda has her, now, I'm going to be, I think it's her grandmother's. Maybe it's her mother's, but I think it's her grandmother's diaries, where they talk about growing up in the Owens Valley, of California, really rural. The little town that her mother was born in doesn't even exist anymore. All that's there is what was the old railroad station, and it's a museum. But the town doesn't even exist anymore. And just talking about rural life and growing up in that area and what it was like. And if you wanted, one of the things that stands out to me is that she used to make lace, because if you wanted something lace on your dress, you couldn't afford to buy it. You had to make it yourself. So she would make the lace for the clothes that she made.
It's amazing.
And we've lost so much of that
Mhm.
because it's just too easy to order a bunch. Yeah, okay. It was her grandmother, her mother's mother.
The interesting thing about out west,
Mhm.
it's all interesting, to be
Yeah,
honest with you.
it is.
All of it is freaking interesting. I mean, interesting, at least to me and to
Mhm.
many people. But to me, because of these things that you're saying, these details and stuff, I mean, they had to make it. I'm sure they could purchase it, but boy, pretty penny.
Yeah, it
Um,
was real expensive. Yeah.
but what's interesting to me in one angle is that out west, I mean, I can't say this for sure, but even in the late 1800s, as things were generally getting established, they still weren't established. It
Mhm.
was still a work in progress. Obviously, it's always is, but these were people that were traveling and settling.
Yeah, for
They were
months at a time.
forming, right? So that journey,
Mhm.
well, your family
Yeah.
earlier, I would assume than that, but the point is that that journey plus the establishment wherever they settled, it makes for just such a it's a great and plus printing was more available. The whole story could
Mhm.
be told if we're lucky. They were told. Um, it's just a unique experience to be able to well to
Yeah.
read about it from our vantage point today. So yeah, those things are exciting to me. It's kind of nerdy in a way, but not.
It is kind of nerdy in a way, but it's also kind of cool when you stop and think about it. I mean, a lot of the things that we in America take for granted came out of that era. When you look at something as simple as what we know as biscuits or pancakes, is basically just a quick bread. They wanted bread when they were out in the wagons, and the fur trappers, they wanted bread. Well, it was a heck of a lot easier to mix up a batch of biscuits and bake them in a Dutch oven over a fire than it was to try to take all the fixins to bake a genuine loaf of bread in an oven.
Is it wrong? Well, go ahead because I don't want
So,
to spoil it.
it basically biscuits, I mean, depending upon which kind you are talking about, because there are several different types, but basically it's nothing more than white bread that they would
Yeah,
have with their meals.
but it's sure good,
Oh, they're damn good.
especially with butter.
Hmm.
I was
Or
gonna say anytime. I was gonna say I didn't want to ruin it at the time, but is it wrong that when someone says Dutch oven, I think of something totally different?
it is wrong. A
Okay,
Dutch oven being a big cast iron pot.
no, I know, but you know what I'm
Okay,
thinking of?
just yeah, I know what you're thinking of. But then you got to get out more. So
I'm sorry, I
yeah,
don't know why, but no,
yeah.
but okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I mean, but it's just little simple things like that. And it's the same thing with our version of pancakes or flapjacks or whatever you want to call them. It was a quick bread to have in the morning with
Right.
a couple of eggs and just, then you can pack up because you could mix it up, cook it right there and be done. And
Let,
then
let me
you didn't have to haul a whole bunch of stuff with you.
look. Now that you're saying that, and we're
Mhm.
still roughly in the food area,
Mhm.
did you ever see the movie Pleasantville?
Mhm. No. I've heard of it, but I've not seen it.
I recommend you watching it.
Okay.
It's a recommendation from me
Mhm.
to you and Linda.
Okay.
It's very special, in my
Okay.
opinion, on many levels. Pleasantville, but there's a scene that I wanted to point. It's a very nice movie on many
Okay.
levels. Um, it's a feel good movie in my opinion. It's a good movie.
Comedy drama. Okay.
Yeah, I think it's maybe some of you have seen it out there and you can rate it so that Mark can have an idea depending on your but I would recommend that one. Now I will say
Okay.
this. I'll just one scene from it. In one scene, well, here's what it is. What it is a kid and his sister get thrown into a what let's call it a Mayberry type TV show set in their reality. So
Mhm.
they're actual normal 1990s or something kids,
Mhm.
but something or other Don Knotts is in it, by the way.
Okay.
Something or other, and now they're inside the show due to their lack of belief in the world around them, good trust, and
Mhm.
just you'll have to see. But now they're in this world. They're used to their 1990s, 1980s, 1990s, whatever lifestyles. Everything is at reach. But in this new world, everything is a little bit more or a lot more innocent and whatnot. Well, when they're in there, the mom
Mhm.
and nobody knows them. I'm sorry, no, nobody recognizes them as something foreign. They
Hmm.
are part of they just slipped into the role of two kids in a Mayberry house.
Okay.
So automatically everybody treats them like they're the kids of the house and whatnot. And they're confused and the whole thing, it's just an incredible thing. Well, the mom says, kids, come down. You're gonna be late for school, and they're like rushing down. What are you gonna do, sister? And they're like, I don't know, just play along for now. What? And yeah, they play along, and so they rush down the thing. When they come down and they open up the mom has prepared their breakfast before they go to school. But the breakfast is all out, like just stacks of pancakes and butter and like and like ham,
Hmm.
Canadian bacon slabs sitting there. It's like this mountain of food. I just fix this up real quick for you before you go. We wouldn't want you to feel starved at school. And they're looking at the food. It's so in contrast to what like today's life,
Yeah.
where grab something and run.
Hmm.
um so that contrast and stuff. So I know I just the reason I brought it up is that you're talking about back then and
Hmm.
having something quick to eat and stuff. So I just
Yeah.
parallel.
Well, actually, the big breakfast was 100% marketing because prior, I mean, we're talking about back in the I want to say the late 1860s. It may have been later than that, but I want to say the 1860s. Most folks, when they got up, they would have, a piece of something left over from last night, or they'd have a piece of bread,
Mhm.
and maybe some coffee or some juice or milk or just plain water, whatever. And, nibble on that and then go out and start working in the fields or doing the chores that they needed to do or what have you. And the big meal was in midday. That was the big meal. Much the same way as it is in most places in Europe. Most places I've been to in Europe, the big meal is at midday.
Mhm.
And dinner, maybe at what we would call dinner time, is, maybe some cold cuts, maybe some, things like that. But breakfast was always just kind of something quick, just so your stomach didn't growl on your way to the big meal.
Right.
And
That's
then,
yeah.
my God, I'm trying to remember who it was. America started to get on this kind of exercise and good diet kick. This is about the time that all the sanitariums came up, where people went to get healthy, and it was a lot of gyms and a lot of, we're gonna,
Mm.
feed you on grains and no red meat and all this other
That was
kind
the
of
late
stuff.
1800s
Yeah,
and into the turn of the century.
right. It was about the time when Kellogg came along with the Battle Creek Sanitarium and all that other the quacks basically. Well, they started convincing people that no, breakfast is the most important meal of the day because your body needs that fuel to run on. And then you should eat a smaller lunch and have your big meal at dinner. And we just kind of adopted that, and nobody else changed but us. And it was, you need to have a couple of eggs, and you need to have some bacon, and you need to have some bread. And Southerners, they took that and ran with it
Mhm.
because they would fry up their sausage, and then they got all these, all the grease and the drippings, and well, let's make gravy and let's put that over our biscuits. And next thing you know, you've got pancakes and a waffle and biscuits and gravy and eggs and ham and
Yeah.
bacon and sausage. And I mean, just, but that's all relatively new, as
Yeah.
far as the history is
It
concerned.
should be a basic, simple something to keep you,
Yeah.
to set you on your way. Well, it should be is a mouthful because each person in a general sense is their own person. So maybe somebody
Mhm.
can eat a horse in the morning and that's what they
Yeah.
need. So there's that too. But
Well, and everybody's different too. Now, me, I'm not really a breakfast person. When I get up in the morning, uh, I'm kind of with Jim Dockerel on this one. Coffee and cigarettes. That's it. I mean, I need to wake up. I'm not hungry. I won't eat when I first get up. I need to be up for a couple 3 hours.
so you don't just get up
Yeah.
and run to the fridge and start going,
No,
"Oh."
no. I get up, I turn on the coffee, and I come back here. I sit down and try to focus my eyes.
Do you
But
talking about? Well, go ahead.
Well, I was gonna just get into something
Oh no,
that.
no. Then let me
Go ahead.
ask you. I'm sorry. I'm sorry because
No,
I
go
don't
for
want
it.
to forget this. Do you like your coffee strong I know this is it could be I know this is sort of like such a broad thing, but do you like your coffee strong? Okay, I'll say it like this. There's a level
Mhm.
of coffeeness mixed with the hot steaming water that just sets it on. You know, it's like we're
I,
crank
I,
it up.
I
And then
don't.
there's a level last part. There's a level where it's slightly into the more watery than just not quite the coffee where you're like, what a disappointment. Do
Yeah.
you have that issue or no?
My coffee cup is 16 ounces. I've been using this coffee cup forever. Okay. And I have a coffee scoop that is an eighth of a cup. And when I make coffee, it's one rounded over the top, not level.
Heaping.
Not exactly heaping. I kind of shake it like this. I shake the scoop. It's one per cup. And I make two of these types of cups of coffee in the morning and then in the evening. And on the coffee maker, it says 6 cups. Well, baloney. It's two of my cups. So one
Gotcha.
scoop per cup.
Do you change coffee brands?
No. Yes and no. Um, there are brands that I don't like, but I don't have a favorite. Folgers they can keep. I will jump over 3 trucks full of Folgers to get to a store brand coffee because Folgers has always tasted like the building was on fire when they were putting it in the can. It just tastes burnt. I've had dark roast, I've had medium roast, I've had light roast. I mean, I've traveled over quite a bit of Western Europe. I've been in France, Austria, Switzerland, Germany, the Netherlands, Belgium, Luxembourg. I've had really excellent coffee. I've had really rotten coffee.
Last question. Go ahead.
So, but I have never had anything that tasted as disgusting as Folgers coffee.
So, do you overdo the frothy and sprinkles, or do you avoid those?
I don't have any of that at all. If it if
Wait a
if
sec.
my coffee is frothy, I did something wrong.
No, the merengue on top or
I
whatnot.
don't I don't do that.
The Cool Whip.
This is not Starbucks.
Wait a second. Wait a second. So, are you telling me that in the mornings, apart from that, you don't do the Cool Whip, and then you put a little bit of the sprinkles? Sometimes they have a different variety, and you put a little gingerbread thing on the side. Are you?
Yes, I'm telling you that. I don't do that.
I'm
What
just
I,
farting around.
what I do is 3 spoons of non-dairy creamer and a packet of sweet and low. That's it. That's the only accessories that I use.
So you haven't measured out basically. So you're
Yeah.
the level of punch is what it is, and
Yeah. But I don't mind stronger coffee. I've had much stronger coffee. It's just not what I make. You know. I
So
mean,
I'll just say,
we went to France. Our first morning in Paris, we were in a little cafe trying to wake up, and it was me, Linda, our daughter, and my parents. Daughter got a soda, so she was easy. But we had 4 cups of coffee. The 4 people wanting a cup of coffee. The cup of coffee was about the size of one of your Cuban coffee cups. And they used probably 3 of my scoops for every cup. And they had to basically tear down, clean, and sanitize the machine for each cup. They weren't all delivered at the same time. It was one, and then 5 minutes later, here comes another one. And by the time the third one came out, the first one was finished. And then by the time it was like battery acid, but God, it was good. That
okay.
was some excellent coffee.
So listen, I'm almost sure that this is the same guy, but we'll go with it. And the reason I say almost sure is because he's, in my opinion, he wasn't an A-lister as far as actors.
Mhm.
In the middle of the Everglades, 12 miles away from any gas station,
Mhm.
and about 20 miles from society at large, here in the deep, I
Swamp.
guess you'd say, swamps of Florida, in the Florida Everglades. We have a solitary road that runs east to west across the state that was built back in the 20s and 30s, allowing for travel from the east to west coast, because before that one had to travel way north or take a tugboat slash ferry slash whatever round the Keys, all up and round and going up to Tampa and whatnot, which was a big deal.
Mhm.
They built that road. Well, maybe 20 years back, I'm standing there, and it's this sort of situation where we would take turns throughout the week. You go on the boat, or you work the register, or you do some sort of alligator pen cleaning or whatever the hell. And that day I was on the register,
Uh-huh.
and my boss had installed a espresso machine,
Mhm.
one of those quick jobs,
Mhm.
nice and shiny. I mean, it looked like a bistro in the middle of this wooden planked building. You know, like everything is like rustic, and then you have
Yeah.
this shiny silver bistro thing in the middle of the thing. It's hilarious as hell. And everybody was drinking Cuban coffee.
Yeah.
And we didn't call it Cuban coffee, but okay, we did call it Cuban coffee, but we didn't call it Cuban coffee for the clientele,
Yeah.
because in their minds they're coming from Europe and this and that. It's just espresso, which
Mhm.
is the same difference, except Cubans have a variety, which we would do for ourselves, where we'd take the sugar, we'd pour in a little bit of the first draft of that coffee, and then we'd agitate with a spoon, so that a froth could start to form with the sugar,
Mhm.
and then we'd pour the rest of the coffee, and then the foam would rise to the top. It would create this mixture that is the typical thing. Anyways, in comes, I'm doing the register, this huge, tall skyscraper of a guy,
Mhm.
and he walks in, and I didn't think, in the jokey side of my head, I thought, oh, we're all dead now. Look at the size of this guy. If we had to fight this guy, like, there's a part in your brain you're calculating other
Yep.
things while you're doing whatever. There's no danger, but in my mind, I'm thinking, how would I take this guy down?
You
You
wouldn't.
know, right? So I'm thinking that while I'm looking at the guy. I mean, that's what guys do. That guys, could you say
Size
at
folks,
least
sizing him up. Yep.
in some part of your corner of your brain? The guy was a famous actor.
Uh-huh.
And thinking back now, but he's much older during
Mhm.
current 20 years time, he was the guy from The Godfather.
Mhm.
He was the boyfriend and then husband of the daughter of The Godfather.
Of Don Corleone, yeah.
Don Corleone's daughter married this guy,
Okay.
being an actor. This guy was a tower,
Mhm.
and he had Italian movie mafia written all over, and the way he carried himself,
Mhm.
loose, not rigid. He was loose, but yet still there was, I mean, it was, you could snapshot it and you're thinking this is full on.
He walked in the door, you heard the theme song. Da, 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 da.
And very, very, very laid back and stuff, like, and he comes up to me and he says, I'm not going to do an Italian American style accent because I can't do that. But he comes up to me and he says, yeah, let me have an espresso. And I said, sure, not a problem. Ring him up, and I go and start making stuff. And then he says, while I'm bringing, he says, yeah, let me get a lime with that. And I looked at him, and he noticed my expression. I said, a lime? Because so for
Yeah.
us, lime is out of the question. It makes no, it's not even in terms of coffee. It's not a thing. But for this guy, it seems to be a thing. I guess that's some Italians might do that. I don't know. I've never even researched it. But he said, yeah, let me have a lime. I put a little bit of lime in it. And we got a little bit in the conversation. Well, Cubans, we don't do it that way, but sure, I'll get you a lime. I got him the lime. And he was pleased in my reaction,
Mhm.
being shocked by
Mhm.
what he asked for, you could see in his face he was pleased with that interaction of like,
Uh-huh.
oh look, this is something he's
Let me,
never
let me show you something. Let me teach you.
right. And so he started doing whatever, and this and that. I was looking at it, I was thinking, that's just disgusting. But he liked it.
Yeah.
And so that's my quick story about the thing. And people use different things that you
Sure.
might think is weird.
Yeah.
I mean, so I mean, there's
Well,
probably people cooking up a batch of bats somewhere in the wild, forevermore jungles of
I,
somewhere.
I have never had it myself, but from what I've read and from what I've heard from other people, Turkish coffee, if it, okay, Gianni Russo? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Um, uh, I've heard that in Turkish coffee, if it's not, if it doesn't take like 3 layers of skin off of your mouth, it's not hot.
Oh, that's
And to me, it's just, oh, no, I'm sorry. I can't do that. No. You know, it just, let's temper it a little bit here.
um.
Now,
You had
so
I
no,
have something.
I've had some really good coffee and I've had some really bad coffee, but at this point, I'm sorry to say it's pretty much just the carrier for the caffeine anymore. I mean, I don't even know if I taste it anymore. I
I like
really don't.
I like a good mixture. I don't just drink it to drink it. I like the caffeine. I'm not. Let's not lie here because the caffeine has a special thing to
Oh
it.
yeah.
But I like a good mixture of sugar plus the added creamer.
Hmm.
I like a good mixture of that
Yep. And
where it hits.
it's funny. I used to drink it black, and then just one day I decided, you know what? I just don't like this anymore. Let me go back to cream and sugar. When I was a kid, my dad drank coffee with cream and sugar, and I always liked to sneak a swig of his coffee because I liked the flavor. It's like, oh, let me go back to that. So there it is. I went back to that. Now, Greg, Snow Crusher, do you salt? Excuse me. Do you salt your coffee? No, I don't, but I have heard of people that do that.
We only use salt to melt the snow around the tires around here.
I have heard, but this goes back to the percolator days when it sat on the stove and it perk, 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 perk. It was always pretty. Yeah. Ooh,
Folgers, right? Wasn't that Folgers?
I thought that was Maxwell House, but
Maxwell House.
either way, yeah,
No,
either
you're
way,
right. You're right.
yeah, great commercial, great old commercial reference. I have heard of people putting just a little tiny bit of salt in the coffee to kind of cut the bitter taste that the percolator, because coffee and tea are completely different. Tea needs boiling water to extract all the flavors out of the leaves. Coffee, you want it less than that. You don't want it boiling because
I
then it
never
turns the coffee bitter.
I never understood tea. I don't understand it. Number one, I've never that I'm aware of. Maybe haven't done it right.
Mm.
I've never gotten the thrill that
Uh-huh.
you get with coffee, the
Uh-huh.
automatic brain thrill of
Mm.
coffee compared to tea. Tea just sets you in a way, but it's not even. There's no noticeable. Coffee. You're ready to jump out of a window and roll out into a.
Yeah. Tea is a bit more subtle in the caffeine. Now, ounce for ounce, you take an ounce of tea and an ounce of coffee, there's more caffeine in tea, but you don't use as much tea to make a cup as you do coffee. You use more coffee to get the flavors. Um, now, I have heard of some people putting salt in coffee while it was perking. I've also heard of people putting egg or eggshell in the coffee grounds while it was perking. Now, I don't know what that's supposed to do. I've never had it myself, but I've
Those are
heard of
people
it.
that those people can control themselves. They have to keep inventing stuff.
Well,
No,
I mean, who's to say that whatever's right or whatever's wrong? I know some people put chicory in with their coffee as well. It's
they put
supposed to
what?
cut chicory,
Is that
which
like
is
a grain
it's an
or
American it's a plant, and I don't know if they dried and ground up the leaves, or if they use the root or what part of it. But I've heard of it. I know that it's a thing out there amongst
There's a
certain areas.
there's a
So
certain type of bean. It's like some sort of chickpea slash something, but it's I don't know the details. But in Cuba, due to the lack of,
uh-huh.
they blend with their coffee in order to be able to propagate
Hmm.
to the populace at large. So they're
Yeah,
drinking something that's a hot mess.
they did that in Germany too. They would actually use wood shavings.
It's
Now,
such an ass thing to do to people.
uh, Jamie can probably vouch for this if he watches this show. There is a show over there called QI, which stands for quite interesting. And they bring out a bunch of little facts over the course of the TV show. And one of the things that they brought about was talking about homemade jam or making jam to sell to the public. That years ago, we're talking about the 1800s, possibly earlier, jam was expensive. Specifically, raspberry jam was real expensive. And real raspberry jam was mainly for the upper crust, the people who could really afford it. But the common man wanted it too. It was made out of no raspberries at all. It was made out of turnips or it was made out of rhubarb or whatever, but it was red and it was sweet. And so they liked it. But in order to convince you that this was real raspberry jam, there was actually an illegal trade in wooden raspberry seeds. People would make little raspberry seeds to mix in the jam out of wood,
That's
and folks ate it up. It was red, it was sweet, they liked it, they ate it. And when they got a taste of real raspberry, it was like, what is this?
that's crazy.
You know? So
That's crazy how that works. Just last thing on coffee.
mhm.
I was working in North, almost North Miami, Miami Beach area years and years and years and years ago, and I was at a gas station, and it was early in the morning, and I bought myself a cup of coffee from that gas station,
Okay.
and I drank it, and I had never felt this before. I began to feel
Mhm.
um, moments of great
Mhm.
positive euphoria
Mhm.
from drinking the coffee. But to a degree, it didn't last for a long time, but it was sufficient for, it didn't last for a long time, but it was sufficient for me to take note immediately. Like, what is going on here? It was all good,
Mhm.
good at the level of like hit me with
I
that
gotta go,
again.
I gotta go get some more of that. Yeah.
Right. And it was unusual for me. And I went back and drank again, and it happened again,
Mhm.
but not in other places. And I hate to say this, but this is completely wrong, but I thought it. You can think something and not necessarily say,
Yeah.
by gosh, this
Did
is the
some
truth of the
did
matter.
somebody put something in this? You know?
Exactly. That's what I was thinking. I think, did somebody spike the punch with something incredibly wonderful? I'm sorry to say.
And do they
Because,
sell it in 6 packs?
yeah. Um, and it was an incredible thing.
Mhm.
Somebody, it, it, it could be anything, but that thought came to my head because it was such a feeling of euphoric niceness.
But
I don't even want to call it
you
like,
weren't fuzzy headed or anything like
I was
that.
as clear as the turn signal turning from red to green,
Wow.
go go go, but not super fast. Great. It felt like some sort of um getting into some sort of high, and but it wasn't a crazed thing. And I was thinking, could it be like when people spike the, man,
I guess
this
it
is the
could
greatest
be.
iced tea I've ever here at your restaurant. Your iced teas are great. Yeah, because we spike them. I love these candies. I love these bourbon candies. I don't know why.
Yeah. I could tell you a story about that. You've seen the candies that we have here. It's called Mon Cherie. It's like it's a maraschino cherry in a cherry cream
Mm-hmm.
wrapped in chocolate.
Mm-hmm.
In Germany, they are not that way. It is a maraschino cherry, a same size piece of chocolate, but instead of that cherry flavored cream, it is a cherry brandy.
Okay.
I give Linda a package of those things, and it was like, holy cow. I had to pour her back into the car. It's like, no more candy for you. But it was interesting to say the least. You had to be careful over there. Certain, and it was just right there on the shelf. I mean, a kid could go up and buy it and do whatever,
Yeah.
you know. But it was just a little bit different, you know.
Well,
And it's a different attitude over there. I mean, the ice cream truck, it was all hand scooped on the ice cream truck, and they would come around to the hangars on the airfield, and you'd hear the music and everything, run out there and get ice cream, what have you, get an ice cream cone or a dish for a sundae or what have you. And he wouldn't serve you if you were on duty, but there were two different dishes that they would, two or three different flavors of ice cream, some nuts and some cherries and some sprinkles, and then he'd pour brandy over the top of it and serve it. But he would not sell it to you if you were on duty. So
um,
it's just a different attitude.
so not
Over
go ahead.
over here, your ice cream truck would get shut down if you did that.
Yeah.
No.
Um, Sort of slightly within the realm, not where we're at now, but where we were when we were talking about like old timey
Mhm.
people explaining about the future,
Yeah.
about the past. I also ran into. I mean, it's not really quite related, other than
Mhm.
1800s as a theme,
Yeah.
and the fact that it's America. But I watched a documentary, very well done, by a British guy. But the documentary was about Emily Dickinson.
Okay.
Um, and the British guy, a professor
Mhm.
of literature and whatnot, um, laid out her story in such a great way. I mean, it's just very nice the way, because there's ways of doing it and there's ways of doing it, and
Mhm.
he did an examination that was of her life in a very interesting way. Um, and they told her story, and my goodness, dude, America in the 1800s, New England area, and this little slice, because that's where the good stuff is at, in my opinion. I mean,
Mhm.
no, if you like with these things, I like the idea of carving out a little corner of what life was like from the vantage point of the people involved there specific, because that gives you some sort of perspective, and you can peer out through their eyes
Right.
vicariously and sort of get an idea of stuff. But obviously she's a figure, an American figure that is bigger than life at this point. But he laid out her life story and the tragedies and the common ailments that occurred, and
Mhm.
her particular ailments and her tragedies in her life and stuff, and the things that she would consume, and life around her town and stuff, and the people involved. And it just, when you, I guess where I'm going with this is to kind of connect with when you internalize a little bit
Mhm.
other experiences, and it's set in a time and place, you acquire empathy.
Mhm.
I mean, because we're human after all, unless we're, I mean, cold cut, psychopathic or whatnot.
Mhm.
You acquire you acquire some empathy and understanding from that vantage point, and that place and stuff, and it can only help people to slightly be more appreciative of a bigger picture. In other words, people that run out the door
Mhm.
screaming, hooting, hollering over one thing or the other, when they're using like history, events of the past, and pointing fingers and such. Um, have they do these people, have they done the careful? I've not done the careful. I'm just saying that I have my little moments. But if you do a careful look at history, how could you be so judgmental about the actions of people in their given time? You can be judgmental by critiquing from your vantage point and understanding it's just your vantage point and there's limitations to that and this and that. You could do such things, but but you would be more of an understanding person to understand others, is what I'm getting at. And so watching Emily Dickinson's life, she's a bigger than life figure, but she was quite human and exposed in her time as well. Her father died. Her mother was ill. She had family members dying left and right. She closed herself off from the world. Maybe I associate with that part. She would write in her house endlessly. She didn't want her things published. She wanted them burned after she died. They still kept them, and thank goodness, because now everybody's got these lovely poetic things. Just a series of things. And she critiqued the world around her at that time as well. So people living at the time had their particular critiques of limitations in what women can do in terms
Sure.
of writing or standing out there. It's just a bunch of different things. And it really, as opposed to, and I guess I'm going out of my lane in terms of what we're talking about today, but for some reason that doesn't really much matter to me in general.
Not to this podcast,
So, but to me, it spoke to me, or the ideas came up where, if you, so it's one thing to say, I'll just throw it out there, some general in some army, what a son of a gun, look what happened here and there. All that might be true, but your lens is broad. But if you say, okay, I'm gonna pass judgment on this person back in history, if you zoom in that microscope and take a look at the lay of the land around him and the specifics, you can still make that broader judgment call, but now you can see all the intricate things, and
Right.
maybe your world will be a little bit more open, because you'll say, well, things were complicated and all these things were happening at once, and this person was involved in the life that he was involved with, the situations involved around him, and so these actions incurred this response and all these, and so you become less of an ass.
Well,
If you're lucky.
it's not only that, but you get a lot of historical context too. We have the luxury of looking back on that kind of thing with 2020 hindsight.
Yeah.
And we can go back and we can look and see the mistakes. We can count the mistakes. We can make up for our own minds who was right, who was wrong, who was on the side of good, who was on the side of the bad guys. And we can make those judgments, but we didn't live that life. We don't know what was going on in these people's heads, in their hearts, or otherwise. And that's regardless of whether you're talking about a general or a pioneer coming out this way. I mean, when you stop and think about it, every pioneer that came out west left the United States for a lawless territory. They weren't under the protection of the U.S. government. There was no safety net, So if you were working your way across the Great Plains and your wagon broke down and you were too dumb or too lazy to fix it, that's just where you stayed.
Yeah.
And so you had to build up and improvise from that point on, because there was nobody coming to rescue your tail. Now, if you happen to break down in the middle, if you were part of a wagon train working out this way and you broke down as a part of that wagon train, then people would pitch in and you would all work together to get it fixed so that everybody could be on their way. But if you were out by yourself, you were out by yourself, and that's all.
So I'll say, well, there's so there's two things. One, what was the bass player for Pink Floyd?
Roger Waters.
Roger Waters. There's one thing with Roger. I don't know how I'm going to tie this, but I'll try to tie this in. Roger Waters, and then there was okay, I can sort of figure out how to tie this in. And then there's a German family that came to the United States in the 1800s.
Mm-hmm.
There's two parallels in the way people think and whatnot that I just wanted to. So in the 1800s, among many that made their way to the United States, there was a German family. And the German family I want to say, I can't, don't quote me on this, but I want to say it was Texas territory or Texas proper at that time. I think it was Texas territory during that time, but don't quote me on that. The story's out there if anyone wants to really dig into it. The family was raided or attacked or something or other happened where the two sons of the family were taken captive by the Indians.
Okay.
They were pulled. I think it was late 1800s, because now I'm picturing the photo that I saw. They took the children. One child survived, survived and escaped, and came back to his family. The other child disappeared for a decade. Went on raiding, was adopted by the chief, was trained in the ways of the Indian, became, for all intents and purposes, an Indian, part of the tribe, not batting an eye. Went on raids against, American
settlers,
and lived as such until eventually he was retaken or something or other happened, and he was reintegrated into American life, let's say, or let's say European life. American European life, however, because you can easily say that the native life was the American life as well. But the point is, back into the European society, and he had a hard time readjusting. And they talk about his readjustment phase in a broad way, and so eventually it worked out and this and that, but he worked odd jobs and stuff. But the guy, and people were always amazed at him with his knife throwing skills, and because the guy was like, so this is a German guy. And by the way, a German guy, let's take the German guy in the right place and time. That German guy or German a German person such as himself, of that fold back in Europe, would have been hunting and gathering and stuff. Like, it depends, everything in its time. But this was a guy in an 1800s world that would have grown up to be just a guy, a gentleman in his society, that was taken into an Indian world, and he did it up. People would see him throwing the knives and stuff, and the kids were astonished. He was like the guy that was like wonder once he returned into the fold. So there's stories like that. The family was ripped apart. This is one of their children, even though he didn't die, thank goodness. But at the same time, this would have destroyed any. If you think about all the variations and stuff, so the nuance of these things creates a different point of view, as opposed to all these darn settlers and all this and this and that, which could be a perfectly reasonable thing given the context of what you want to address. But once you include nuance into anything, you ruin, I guess, a certain amount of prejudice, if you're fair, to just round everything up and just mark it as done and whatnot. So what I wanted to tie in Roger Waters with is that Roger Waters, obviously he's not German, so how am I going to tie this in? Well, in his lately, actually for years now, Roger Waters has a part of his show where he has screens and everything darkens up in his show, and people are dressed in this sort of fascistic uniform, like whatnot, kind of like Pink Floyd's The Wall sort of theme thing. And he comes out on stage with this black suit, and he's got hammers that, just like in the movie Pink Floyd, the hammers that come eating you. So he's got these hammers crossed over and stuff, and this and that. And there's this whole theme, which is part of the show because it's part of the wall and the whole story. And so I don't think that you, I, or any of us here that have grew up with some sort of exposure to Pink Floyd and understanding would even consider what one British politician guy and others have started to lay upon Roger Waters, calling him, pro-fascist and pro this and that. They've confused the signals. Now, mind you, Roger Waters is a little bit more of a I don't want to be loose with my but he leans in a certain direction
Mhm.
and he has certain political things, but that's a far cry. I mean, in an advanced society, you could believe crazy things that other people might think are not crazy, but if you're a stand-up person and you're
Well,
you follow, well, let me just wrap this bit up. They've gone after him on that note, um, and I just wanted to say, as the I guess the slight moral of the thing is that if people forget, this is where it ties in with all the other stuff. If people forget the specifics of where something evolved from, and the generations pile on from its original intent and purpose and meaning and so on, somebody today could turn around and see something like that, and they have no way of connecting a dramatic event, portraying a situation, a scenario for the purposes of creative and this and that. They would be detached from that original intent, and all of a sudden, this person that was cheered by many people are now looked on as some sort of menace.
and all I was going to say was the criticism he's getting on this is being made by people that don't get it. Now, um, who was it out here that said Jim Dockrell said that that's been a part of his show for 25 plus years?
Mm-hmm.
What it is it's a criticism, it's a
Yeah,
warning,
it's a critique. Yeah.
it's a critique.
Mm.
You're not getting it. This is what they're doing. It's protest,
Mm-hmm.
it's criticism, it's critique. Now what they are doing is they're equating that to support.
Mm-hmm.
No, he's not supporting these things. It's a warning.
Yeah.
It's so all your criticism, and these guys are going back, and we got Al talking about it, Jim Dockrell talking about it. Um, they're trying to say that he is pro-fascism and pro-Nazism by
Mm-hmm.
doing this stuff, and this is telling me that they don't get it, that they don't understand what they're seeing, that they don't know what they're seeing.
Yeah.
They're confusing critique with support.
Yeah, which is not irrational if the evidence is it. The problem. Okay, so I think
Mm-hmm.
the society. So this is okay. So the reason I'm glad see, I didn't know it was going to end up with connecting in this perfect way. At least in my mind, it is. But it kind of connects with the other things. If I'll say this most outrageous thing, I'll say an outrageous thing. So if you take a figure from history like Christopher Columbus, and we've been taught Christopher Columbus ransacking dead Indians, Europeans flooding the gates, and I'm driving a Chevy down the auto, the parkway now, on my way to a Big Mac and fries, and you tie that string together, that shallow interpretation.
Uh-huh.
You know, if you compact that from the vantage, if education, if people's reading of history is so non-existent and they take it from I guess the fanatical movements of the time, for whatever purposes, then you have people saying, well, that's bad because the way they presented it, that 1 = 1 = 1, that's 3, and yeah, that 3, so I'm against 3, so
Well,
now I'm
but
against 3, and 3 is bad, and so, but if you sat and did some digging, and then you saw that 3 + 1 + 1 is not just 1 + 1, there's some stuff in the middle where you have to add up other thing. If you're more nuanced, then all of a sudden it's not just that. I used Christopher Columbus as an example. It could be any freaking thing.
yeah.
How could we be a judge of things around us if
Well,
we don't take a moment to read the material and investigate what exactly we're passing judgment on?
but it's easy to pass judgment on something you have absolutely no idea about. it's real easy to judge something when you don't know what you're talking about, because you don't have to know what you're talking about. I mean, George Orwell said it best: 2 legs bad, 4 legs good. You don't even have to know what it means. All you have to do is be able to shout it.
Mind you, a nuance within this. I acknowledge there's no okay, so there's no matter what I sit here and say, there's no way reasonably that I can say, well, oh, I am incredibly quite knowledgeable on X amount of things. I could be knowledgeable in some ways somehow, but the amount of things that I'm unaware of outnumber the things that I am aware of.
Mm-hmm. And most
And
everybody is the same way. Yeah.
and yet and yet there's a difference between I this is one of the ones that I've now claimed as a truism somehow, more or less, that there's a difference between ignorance and persistent ignorance. So one thing is, I'm ignorant on something. Yeah, I don't like that. And you can do that on simple things like I don't like
Sure.
a certain band or a certain whatever. Those are
Mm-hmm.
shallow things, but like in general, there's things that are more important. So if you think, oh, I don't like that, but then you say, well, no, Eloy, this and this and this. Take a look at this. Oh, I see. At worst, I could say, no, well, I don't agree with it. Well, why not? I don't know. I'm not, but at least there's some sort of attempt to sort of work it out. But so that's one thing. And you might be you might have a situation where you're like, yeah, you're right, that additional thing changes my perspective. That's one thing. You could be ignorant and but you're not stuck in ignorance. You could expand from it. And then there's persistent ignorance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Two categories. And the persistent ignorance is that no matter what, beyond the plane of reason, the person will be sitting in that driver's seat going down that road,
Mm-hmm.
just because
Right.
regardless of anything. There's a lot of people like that.
Yep.
For many reasons that
And
they're like that.
I have no time for those kind of people. I mean, yeah, because what you're doing is you're beating your head against a wall. So I don't even entertain discussions with those kind of people. You are free to think anything you want, but you're not free to demand I participate in your fantasy or delusion.
The,
Okay.
the unfortunate
So,
part, the unfortunate part of all this is that those people that do that
mm-hmm.
are as close to us as you can just reach out your hand and tap, because they are us, just a degree different, to whatever degree that might be. Everything they're capable of being ignorant on, one is capable of being ignorant
Oh, sure.
on. And many of the things that we're unaware of, that we are ignorant. So the sad part, well, I'll just say the sad part of it is that to a degree, we're all in it together, because we suffer from the same condition of the mind and existence and all this and that. So in other words, we have to get on with it with the people that are in this. And since we're not animals, all we can do is do what you said, is that I don't have no time for that.
Yeah.
But those people are influential because they bulk up in numbers, and their petulance, insistence, can change the course of things in an unsavory way.
Maybe in some respects, but in other respects, no. And we see it all the time. They fail repeatedly. They fail repeatedly because if people don't like your message, they're just not going to follow you. That doesn't mean they're going to stop trying. I mean, the UK is going through it right now with these stop oil people. And people are sick and tired of it, because they also see that these people are just ignorant. We've got to stop oil because of climate change. Really? What's your banner made out of? Plastic. What's plastic made out of? Oil. Don't you see? You don't get it. You don't get it. Look at the clothes you're wearing. Half of it's polyester.
Mhm. I like,
You
you know
know,
what? I like, I like as an idea the follow by example thing. So I like by the idea. So like when a politician, as an example, it could be anything,
hmm
says, and I think in order to reduce the this and that, or to save the woolly mammoth, or to whatnot, whatever the heck they say, and we must cut down on this. I think
hmm
by law, the people that that offer that
hmm
should lead by example, live the way they're saying they want others to live for 10 years, while others live the way the hell they want. And then after 10 years of that dumbass wanting other people to do without with X, Y, and Z, after 10 years, we will then gather, reevaluate, and then offer the decision, perhaps. See, the point is that all these people that offer, they keep living it up, but
Oh
what they
yeah.
want is other people to.
Right. They yeah, 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 exactly. They want to control their own lives. They want the freedom to control their own lives, but retain the freedom to tell you how to run yours.
Yeah.
And I have one question for them. What makes you think your opinion's important? Yeah, everybody has an opinion. Now that doesn't bode well for this podcast because that's what we do for an hour and a half is we sit here and we give our opinions on stuff.
But we're not forcing anybody in
No,
terms of like, you don't. It's just ideas. It's just
yes, it
conversing.
absolutely. But we've gotten this, I don't know, it's become it's not even an American thing anymore because it's happening all over the world. Everybody thinks that their opinion is the most important thing in the world and I've got to spread my opinion around. Sorry, cousin, maybe you're just not important. Maybe you're just like me. Maybe you're just another mope hoping like hell he gets 50,000 miles out of a set of tires and that I don't get a ticket today.
But it's okay for them to, so like, let's say it's okay for them to say, well, look, like, let's go an extreme. Automobiles are a thorn in society's side, and plus
Yeah.
it destroys the earth due to this and that. I'm
hmm
not saying, mind you, I'm using this as an example. I'm not
Right.
saying whether I agree this now. um and I think that this and that, and I this and that. Now that person can say all that
hmm
and then some. Where he or she crosses the line is when that their thing is imposed by a select committee that wishes such things to be enacted. Meanwhile, they're riding in the most expensive, luxurious. So no, lead by example. Get in a ride a bike, and do that for 10 years, and then later, this we'll discuss.
Well, I would be against that. Don't get in a horse. Get on a horse or get in a buggy, but don't get in a horse.
Yeah, yeah.
You won't
Well,
enjoy it.
well, yeah, that probably wouldn't be nice, but you get the point. Let me see if I can.
Yeah, I was going to say you're out of focus, or I am, one of the two.
That out of focus. Maybe I was entering the horse, and it was getting blurry.
Yeah, that's what things will look like depending upon which end you're looking through. So, but again, we have this romanticized opinion of the good old days. We do it. We do it here on this podcast. We have a nostalgic, romanticized opinion of the good old days, but we forget. We remember the good things. We remember the things we like, but we don't remember the rotten things. We don't remember the bad things. My grandfather went blind in his 50s over something because he had something that is 100% repairable now. He had cataracts. There was no cataract surgery. He sat there and he went blind until the day he died. Now, go in, zap, zap, zap with the laser, your cataracts are done. He was forced to retire. He could have had, several more years of work and of being out on the houseboat with the family and the whole thing, but he couldn't do it. He physically could not see. So we forget about things like that. We forget about polio. We forget about all the various medical advances that have prolonged and embittered our lives.
Yeah.
Um, so it's fine to be nostalgic over some things, but to get rid of the vehicles, what we have to move people and freight somehow. And don't tell me about horses. Don't talk to me about horses because the automobile basically saved the horse. I mean, when you think of the number of horses in New York at its height, the number that they died in the thousands every day. Horses die. They just get old and they die. What do you do with an old dead horse? What do you do with the mountains of manure? You have cholera outbreaks, is what you do. The tonnage of the waste, it just can't be described. You want to bring that back? You want to bring back the cholera outbreaks? Really? No. There. I'm not saying that life is perfect because it's far from it. But there are certain things we don't have to worry about or we don't have to do
because of advances.
somebody else figured it out back then and figured a way out of it. Well, we're in another situation. We're in this paradigm now. There are millions of people worldwide, a hell of a lot smarter than anybody here, that are working on figuring out the next thing, the next paradigm. It will shift, it will change. But all the standing in the streets with banners and blocking traffic and affecting other people's lives for your pet project isn't going to make that happen any faster. All it's going to do is piss off everybody you meet and condemn your cause. And
Yeah.
history is proof of that. It has happened multiple times, over and over and over. So,
I saw a debate
yeah, there you go.
that was what?
Jim Dockerel. In the good old days, you could be very likely dead by 35. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
Um, there was a debate. I think that this will be. I think this will be interesting. I think this will be interesting. Um, between vet vegetarians
Mm-hmm.
and non,
Okay.
but the vegetarian side was arguing that it is wholly, completely unnecessary and cruel and all the things that you can jot to sacrifice animals in order for humans to eat. And so they are on the quest to reduce this misery and pain for animals
Mm-hmm.
um, by seeking out alternative ways and so on. And the other people were like the meat eaters, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the debate went back and forth, and the people that were meat eaters were so the vegetarian people in this particular case were very empathic people.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there are people that I mean, who among us does not feel when you see some sort of abuse on
Well,
some
sure.
creature? It actually it infuriates me.
Yeah, me too.
I've gone out of my way and walked up to people that have seen stuff happen. Like, look, I'm even already,
Yeah.
and I've called them out, looked at them straight, bold in the eye. I will go to town on that. I will go to town on that. I will go to town because
Mm-hmm.
there's it just I can't. Anyways, with that said, but then again, I'll sit at home and eat a half a slab of ribs. But there's a difference there. It may not be it may not make much of a difference at the end results of an
Mm-hmm.
animal, but all things being equal, we have to manage. We're
Sure.
human beings and we eat, but let's go past that. They're very empathic. There's a conversation to be had with that could be had, but they're
That's
very
fine.
empathic. The animal people, the others, one was a lady,
Mm-hmm.
and the other one was a guy, and the lady was cold cut, high cold cut level, um, philosophically strong.
Mm-hmm.
Like you can't mess with this lady. This lady is impenetrable
Mm-hmm.
in terms of the way she uses because there's a set of keys that unlock doors in a conversation, and if you
Mm-hmm.
play by those rules, which are proper rules,
Mm-hmm.
you have to agree regardless. You can deny agreeing, which is what everybody ended up doing, but
Right.
she was impenetrable. The other guy is also philosophically minded but is more lenient. I kind of lean towards his, like, I don't mind looking at the philosophical stuff, but he's lenient with outcomes because at the end we're human and we're liable to, so
Mm-hmm.
he was more. But the lady made it impossible for these two to be able to, she didn't make it impossible. She actually was putting down, prove to me or give evidence to me why I should even give a crap. And she was dry.
Mm-hmm.
Why does that matter other than your feelings?
Mm-hmm.
And she was solid, cold cut with it. And
Mm-hmm.
I looked at her and I was upset with her attitude, but at the same time, I knew what she was doing. So I was like, I'm going to have to let her pass. I
Yeah.
must give her access because but she was cold, cold, mean, but she
Mm-hmm.
was true like an arrow.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the emotional people couldn't cross the Rubicon. They couldn't even understand her argument. Their argument, the vegetarian people, is like
Mm-hmm.
killing is bad, which is true in my opinion. But if you follow that logic, you end up with big problems. If you really are going to hone things in, but at some point you can't, you have to just give up because there's no solution. So killing is bad. We don't want animals to hurt, and therefore we want to reduce animal suffering. And hopefully one day more and more people will be vegetarian and whatnot. And that was their thing. And she wasn't budging. She was saying, show me why that's better than the other thing and why does it matter. And she kept honing in on it, and they couldn't do it. They couldn't
Yeah.
even they couldn't even understand what she was saying because they're emotive,
Because it was their passionate. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
she was cold cut, and the other guy was trying to balance it. Anyways, long story short, while they're doing all that, I thought to myself, they don't want humans killing, and there's more to it. They don't want humans killing because we are sentient. They don't want human killing because we have the use of reason. They don't want humans killing because we are the shepherds of this land.
Mm-hmm.
A number of things. And then I thought to myself, well, they're against all this, but how about animals killing each other? They can never stop
Yeah.
that because they had this sort of philosophical. What about animal? And guess what? I thought that, and not too long after, the other guy said that. He said, "Well, what about a wolf and a deer?
Mm-hmm.
Shouldn't that deer be protected from the wolf?" He went in that direction. And the problem with doing that is that the obvious, at one level, the obvious answer is there's killing going on left and right all the time. And
Right.
some of that, and a lot of that killing is for food. And if
Mm-hmm.
anything, we are kind of, if you look at it, at the top of the food chain. Um, so there's all these things. And what do you think about all that?
That's a lot to unpack. But personally, I think that personal opinions like that are simply that, personal opinions.
Yeah.
If um, if you really believe that taking an animal's life for the purpose of food is immoral, then you are free to have that opinion and live that life.
Right.
You do not have the right, on the other hand, to impose it on me. It's 100% a personal choice.
Mm-hmm.
I know of people, I don't know them personally. Um, well, I know a couple of people who aren't really super fond of meat. They'll have a little bit, but they would much rather have big, huge bunches of a variety of different vegetables. Or maybe they'll just eat fish. They won't eat red meat or pork. Or
Right.
maybe they don't want dairy or something like that because they just, be it they have some allergy or they just don't like the taste. I mean, we're individuals, but arguing who's right and who's wrong is in that, to me, when you put it on a moral level, it's like arguing which is the prettiest side of the coin, heads or tails. To me, just my opinion. I don't have a moral issue with eating meat. I don't have a moral issue with people who choose not to eat meat because I don't think it's a moral question. I think that's and I always get this word wrong, anthropomorphizing. You are equating uh, a, a steer's life with a human's life when you say that it's wrong to kill. Well, maybe in certain circumstances it is wrong to kill, but the earth just doesn't have enough arable land on it to support the population.
Yeah. She even said,
you can't grow enough food to support the entire population.
You got to hear this.
Well, let me finish this one thing. I was talking to Linda about this earlier. I had to look it up because I didn't believe it. But I heard in a video one day that if you all the scientists, all the archaeologists, all the geologists, all the paleontologists, everybody who's ever studied the movement or migration of man as far back as you can go, they basically agree, they estimate that approximately half of the people who have ever existed on Earth are alive today. They estimate that over the course of history, man has been walking the Earth. There have been 15 billion people. There are 8 billion alive right now. So more than half of the people that have ever existed on this planet are alive right this minute. There is no way we can feed this many people with the arable land we have for raising crops, for food. Now, somebody out there is going to say, well, the earth is overpopulated. Well, who do you want to kill off first?
They should start with the ones that propose the idea.
Well, as you said, lead by example, live the life. If you think that the earth is overpopulated, be my guest on being the first
because
one.
what? Because think about it. Why is it that the people that propose such thing are never on that list? They're never in line saying, well, I believe in this idea so much, so I'm the no, it's never like that. They are so full of crap, like all these eugenics
They don't
people
want to sacrifice, they want you to sacrifice.
Yeah, these eugenics people that crossed from the 1800s to all these people. Isn't it it's incredible how these, have you seen those toys where the two balls hit and smash into each other? It's funny how their brain, it never connects in like the two neurons thinking, wait, I proposed this idea because it's my worldview, so I'm gonna sign my ass up. No, they never do that. That's why you can check that one off as people full of hogwash. Hogwash, I tell you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's the same as the people that are saying stop with oil. How'd they get to the protest? Was it in a cab? Was it in an Uber? Was it in a bus? Did they ride a bike? There's oil products in all of them.
Yeah, they should stop wearing freaking shoes with rubber, and mind you, don't even use leather for the shoes. I mean, just look.
Yeah. Well, even if it's canvas, that had to come from somewhere.
Yeah,
You know, Milton Friedman used to do. Milton Friedman used to give a speech, and he talked about nobody knows how to make a pencil. Nobody knows how to make a pencil. People know how to make certain parts of the pencil. But the guy who went and cut down the tree doesn't know a ding dong thing about making that little metal thing that holds the eraser on.
Yeah.
And he doesn't know a damn thing about the mine that produced the graphite. And he doesn't know a damn thing about the wood that went into making the pencil. And he doesn't know a damn thing about the rubber that went into making the eraser. Nobody knows how to make a pencil, but we know how to make the various parts. And some guy knows how to assemble the pencil, and another guy knows how to paint it. Well, it's the same thing with your, Birkenstocks. You don't know how to make a set of Birkenstocks. If you did, you'd be wearing them. No, you bought them. Where did you buy them? At the store. How did you get there? What's the store made of? How
What's
did the shoes get to the store?
how are the lights on?
Yes. And don't tell me windmills.
Yeah, so it's this reduction of all these things, which if you're unaware, you're unaware. But once you're made aware, once you're, oh wait, it's more complicated, then maybe pull back the reins a little bit on, yeah, just, but we're human at the same time, and you're gonna have people that are passionate and
Sure.
Ideas and thoughts be damned, and we all do that to one degree in certain ways. So it's a complicated thing.
But let's think it through. But let's think it through a little bit here. I am not opposed to getting rid of oil if we can do it. But don't you think we need to have something to replace it before we go getting rid of it?
Yeah.
You don't want to go back to kerosene lamp. Oh, we can't go back to kerosene lamps because that's oil. We'll have to start the whaling fleets again, which means that those will have to be sail. You ready to start whaling again? We've got to have oil for our lamps because we don't have electricity. All renewables will handle it. Where are you getting the batteries? Where are you getting the minerals for the solar cells?
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's just
all interconnected. So let's get something in place to replace it first before we start getting rid of the other,
at the very least.
Yeah. And I'm not opposed to getting rid of it. Let's just have something to replace it first.
No, and at the very least, actually, before even finding that, if you're so hard up on it, stop using the car, stop using the shoes, stop eating the food. It goes back to that.
Yes, stop using everything that has anything to do with petroleum production.
Look, if everybody that thought that the world was overpopulated and wanted to do something about it, signed themselves up and left everybody else alone, the world's balance would be perfect. So in theory, well, I don't know.
It would be survival. It would be survival of the fittest, because the only way you're going to live anywhere without touching petroleum or a petroleum product or byproduct is you're going to be naked out in the forest. And that is, if you don't think that's survival of the fittest, it ding dong sure is. Because with the wolves that these geniuses brought back and the mountain lions, you're no longer the top of the food chain. So buckle up, Buttercup. It's going to be a bumpy ride.
In one part, I remembered of the conversation. This one's a good one. The one guy. Remember, it was the cold cut lady, which was, I don't, soul wise, feeling wise, I didn't like. It was uncomfortable, but I had to allow, because she was like in the brain department, like an arrow. So I was like, damn, she's so harsh. Like, sometimes you have to let things, you have to allow, because at the end we're irrational. Human beings have a level of, anyways, she was very cold. The one guy was more of a balanced kind of guy. It doesn't make him right. And her being cold cut doesn't make her wrong.
No.
But he said, well, you know what? How about insects? He said, check it out. He said, I see a mosquito. I'm going to crush that mosquito right there when it bites me. And she said, and the other people, the vegetarian people said, well, if there's a way for you to nudge them off of you. Mark, she said it. No, but you have to, Mark, her face was as deeply sincere as you can. She said, well, maybe you can nudge them away from you. You don't need to crush it. I mean, how would you feel if you were crushed by it? And so,
anthropomorphizing.
But you see what I'm saying? It's like, it's like, so I understand. Like, if you're a mosquito, like, just to take it to the ridiculous, or if you're a mosquito, obviously you don't want to be crushed. What you want is to suck on that tasty human's flesh and suck up as much
Well,
of their blood as possible. But I'm the human getting bit, so I'm going to crush the hell out of the mosquito.
yeah, yeah. It's real easy to say that when you're not getting bit. You
It
know,
sounds silly, but it's people.
it is silly. It is silly. It's people that are non-ego formed. They have so much empathy. They have this romanticized view of nature that it's all Bambi and Thumper out in the forest. Where actually Thumper's down in his hole going, didn't get eaten today, but I know that hawk is around here somewhere.
I will tell you this though. I have been known to so you can if I see a spider
Mm-hmm.
or something that or some sort of lizard,
Mm-hmm.
I will use a piece of paper or a cup in many instances and just toss them out the front.
Chuck it outside. Yeah.
Yeah, so I've done that.
Yeah, me too.
And this is what we're talking about. So but now imagine if I oversensitize that in my mind and I couldn't step on anything because everything is
Mm-hmm.
that's a problem.
Well, see, there's only one kind of spider that I kill, and that is black widows, because they are a threat, right? Other spiders, I just ignore them. I don't care. I figure anything that eats bugs. You know, we lived over in Hawaii. We had geckos. They say a gecko in your house is good luck.
Yeah.
Well, that house was blessed. I'm telling you, it wasn't just good luck. It was flat out blessed because there were geckos all over the place.
Yeah, there are.
Geckos are cool. They're
here.
bugs.
Yeah, I don't bat an eye with a gecko. I just let them be.
I love them. I love them. I named them. I mean, I probably never saw the same one twice, but I named him. Oh, there goes George. You know,
and to me, there's no grossness in it or anything. We have them here. You'll see them running across the wall, and you're
across the wall. Yeah,
you're like, okay,
upside down, run across the ceiling. It's like nobody likes a smart aleck, man. How the hell do you do that? You know, great. We had one that used to hang out by the bug zapper, which proves that even geckos like barbecue.
They're smart. Well, they're smart because they know what they want and they can see where their food is at. But I'm talking about that food chain thing you were saying. I just want to say this one final thing.
Yeah, then we got to wrap it up.
but I got to share this thing with you.
Okay.
Talking about food chain and whatnot. Dude, I used to feed animals as a side job within my wooded outdoor job.
Uh-huh.
And you haven't lived until you are standing, a fence, like face to face there, like one of those mesh fences, and a Florida panther staring you right, like face to face, like this, and the fence is right there. His head is like this big, and the eyes are right there, and you can see the muscles pulsing across the jaw, and he's looking at you, and the sound is like, and he's not looking at you like we look at each other, like we're looking at each other. You know, it's an incredible thing that we're human beings and we're looking at each other, and so there's this thing where somewhere behind our mind we know that, oh, we're not going to eat each other, like, let's say, but that's not the reasoning or whatever you want to call it that you're looking at the eyes of this cat. The cat was looking at me, a human being, and he was like, like he's saying,
lunch.
Yeah, but the power, and so I was thinking to myself, man, if I'm a human and somehow we made it to the top of the chain, dude, if I had to confront that thing, I'm gonna have to build my ass some sort of spear and start chucking them, and that's exactly what human beings did, because there's no freaking way that a human, unless you're Tarzan,
you're not going toe to toe with a panther. That's all there is to it.
Exactly, dude. It was,
or a grizzly bear, or a wolf, or a mountain lion, or a lynx, or any of those things. You're not even going to go. You're not even going to go toe to toe with a cow.
That's right.
You know, I mean, when they weigh 800 pounds, 8 to 1,200 pounds, you ain't stopping that.
Oh, no.
You know? So, and believe me, if the roles were reversed, that son of a gun would be wearing your pelt. So, you know, we need to stop with the house pet energy here and refocus it in other directions, and just thank your upright walking God that things played out the way that they did, and you have the opposable thumb.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah. Oh man, I'll never forget face to face like that. And we
Mhm,
still had. I've been in the cages with them, but they were younger,
mhm.
and they were in. We were in there with the trainer.
Oh, so that's even worse. He's like, I remember you, you bastard. You wouldn't give me a second piece of chicken.
As long as you're with the trainer,
Yeah.
they're like in the family. But if
Mhm,
you're coming to just feed them or whatever,
mhm,
you're not around them. They look at you and they're like, "Yeah, I'll get my hand if I can get my hands on you or my
mhm.
paws on you or whatever." Oh my goodness,
I
dude.
think I'll call you lunch.
Yeah, dude. It's such a now with Alec. Go ahead.
We had a lynx come through our yard last year. Holy big kitty. Yeah. And you're not going to tangle with that. You watched it go through your yard. You didn't try to chase it.
You didn't give it a parking ticket or something?
No,
You can't stand here.
he gave it its own parking place after it left. It's a reserved for holy big kitty.
Dude, those creatures,
Yeah.
man, Mark, it's like
Hmm.
it's something insane. I mean, we should well,
There's
I
a
don't know.
reason they call them apex predators, because they are at the apex. For their local area, they are the top of the food chain. And they would, they just don't care. They don't have a conscience. They have an instinct. The instinct is my tummy's grumbling.
But
That's
you know
it.
what? Our many ancestors going into the forgettable, unimaginable past were some pretty heavy duty characters, my friend.
Well, they
Because
had to.
oh my goodness, these people we couldn't even. I've thought a little bit about that. Last thing I'll say, I know it's time for us to go. Just those people in the situations, they had to do what they had to do, and they sure as hell did it because we're here to talk about it.
Hmm.
Oh
Yeah.
boy, those people! Like if we were in front of them right now,
Well,
we'd probably be lunch.
dude, they did not live in caves because they liked it. They lived in caves so because it's easy to watch in one direction than it is keep your head on a swivel, especially at night. You know, so you adapt to your environment and you learn survival skills real ding dong fast, because some days you get the bear, some days the bear gets you. Well, you've got to learn how to get that bear.
Yeah.
So no,
All right.
thankfully we don't have to do that. See, that's what I mean. We have the luxury of going to the supermarket. Most of us have never gone out and had to forage for our own food. So we have the luxury of deciding. And think about that. You want to talk about first world problems? You want to talk about first world problems. We have so much at our disposal 24/7. We can afford to turn our noses up at certain types of food because we think that kind of food is wrong.
It's incredible.
How spoiled is that?
I
How
walked.
arrogant
I
is that?
walked down an aisle full of
Mhm,
bread from one point to the other,
mhm.
and I couldn't be bothered because I'm reaching the other end because I know where I'm going to get the what I need, and I'm
Yes.
and all this wonderful creation
Yeah.
of human beings producing things. I'm walking by it as
Mhm.
if oh
And there are people in this world that would give you your kids for the stuff that you turn your nose up at.
yeah.
You know, I mean, how how
Meanwhile,
I
somewhere
don't
somewhere in
know.
the tree hugging community, there's two
Mm,
people trying to round up a mosquito.
yeah, just nudge it away. You don't have to kill it. Just nudge it away. Well, if you have a moral problem with killing, then that's fine.
There's like five of them standing
But
around like
that's your opinion, and let's leave it at that. You don't have the right to tell me that I can't swat the mosquito that just bit me, because trust me, it's gone.
you should have heard. You should have heard. But maybe
I'm
you can
glad I
just.
didn't.
Maybe you can just. And but she did like that. You could just sort of like. And the guy was like, "No, I killed those
Are
little
you
devils."
kidding me? Does the word malaria mean anything to you?
It was so hilarious.
Yeah. All
All
right.
right.
You know what? We never took off. We never welcomed everybody to the Trampled Underfoot podcast. We just started talking, and I think that's cool. So, welcome to the Trampled Underfoot podcast. We're here every Tuesday. Now, you were going to say, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was gonna say that Tuesday, 6:30 Western is 9:30 Eastern. Did you do that just to?
Yeah, I was saying hi so you could say goodbye.
Yeah, I was gonna say goodbye. I should have just said goodbye instead of what I just said. I ruined it for us. Sorry, damn it. Um, we go live every Tuesday, 9:30 Eastern, 6:30 Pacific, here on the Trampled Underfoot podcast show. We also have a Facebook page, Trampled Underfoot Podcast on Facebook, a website, trampledunderfootpodcast.com, where you can catch our past episodes as well. There's a button there called the Wayback Machine button, and I'm sure you can drop those in your podcatcher if you want to listen while you're driving around town or in the woods or whatnot. You can do that for free. And we will catch you here next time, but we're also sponsored by
Harneal Media, your web source, your web solution. Look, just you and me talking here. If you're thinking seriously, or even not seriously, about increasing your web presence and getting your name out there, there's no better way to do that than with a website. And Steve over at Harneal Media is the only person I will ever recommend, because he's not only good at what he does, it is Steve who does it. When you deal with Harneal Media, you're dealing with Steve 100% of the time, not some nameless, faceless person in a call center somewhere that you're never going to talk to ever again. You're talking to Steve. He's competitively priced, 100% personalized service. That's Harneal Media, HARNEAL media.com. Sponsor trampleunderfootpodcast.com.
All right. Well, thank you for that. Thank you all for hanging out with us. I hope you enjoyed it. Nothing like I said before. We'll see you next Tuesday. Enjoy the rest of your week. Have a happy one. Do the things that you love. And we're out of here.
Yeah.
See you.
Peace. Go have the week you deserve.